We want to change that model and make sure that many, many more houses are built and that the price comes down, because, of course, what we want is good quality, secure houses, but also houses that people can afford. There's nothing like the security of having your own house. It is a dream, but it is also about basic security. We'll be taking tough decisions, and we'll take tough decisions because we're absolutely clear about what we're trying to achieve here. The dream of home ownership is real for very many working people. The security of your own home, the dream, the aspiration is hugely, hugely important. And those who have that dream have had it killed by this government because they've taken down the targets for house building, which means that house building will inevitably drop to the lowest level since the Second World War, and that dream will be shattered. And that will drive even more people into the rented sector, and rents, as you know, are through the roof. So we're absolutely clear why we're doing this. Of course, we want to put the targets back up. But if that's all we do, then we'll simply go back to where we were last year when there weren't enough houses being built. So we also want to take the tough decisions to change the rules when it comes to planning and development so that the drivers of housing are local areas according to local need and not landowners and developers according to how much money they can make. So we're very clear about what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it. It's to achieve that home ownership that is so important. And I mean, when I was growing up, my dad was a toolmaker working in a factory. My mum was a nurse. We didn't have a lot of money. Sometimes we couldn't pay all of the bills, but we did have our own house with a mortgage. And that gave a sort of working class sense of security, which is very, very important to so many people across the country. And that's been shattered by this government.
So actually, what you're saying here is you want to build enough houses that house prices come down. That's the thing. This is a Labour government which will have a house prices coming down rather than going up.
Oh, yes. I mean, at the moment, one of the reasons that house prices are so high is because people hoard land, trying to ensure that it gains as much value as possible. Developers and landowners actually have a vested interest in not building so many houses because that keeps the price high. We want to change that model and make sure that many, many more houses are built and that the price comes down because, of course, what we want is good quality, secure houses, but also houses that people can afford. There's nothing like the security of having your own house. It is a dream, but it is also about basic security.
It's also about infrastructure as well. Would you make a commitment that for every number of houses, a certain number of houses, a school will be built, a doctors will be built, a hospital will be built? That's an issue that constantly people tell us about. That it's all right saying we can have 1,000 houses in the corner of our town. What are you going to do to serve the people who live there? Can you make that a part of the system?
Yeah, I do think that needs to be part of the system. And the best house building I've seen, I've been out to see quite a lot of it over the last few months, has been where schools and facilities are built alongside and as part of the housing. But I'd go further than that, because if we give power to local areas to determine where the housing is, we can also ensure that it's around, for example, stations along lines. If you take Northern Powerhouse Rail, if we could have building of houses in the crucial points around the journey, that helps the local economies, that builds and helps make the case for the infrastructure that's needed to join those communities up, to help businesses and people get between the two places, which will be, part of this is about that aspiration of home ownership. It's also about the economy, because for every 100,000 houses we're able to build, there's approximately a 1% boost to GDP. This is hugely important. The economy has flatlined for 13 years. It's been the single biggest failure of this government. And we need to come into office, clear up the mess that they've made and kickstart the economy.
And it's going to cost money to do that. It's going to cost money to increase infrastructure. Can you say that you will be willing to increase the national debt, for example, in the short term to do that? Are you willing to spend, because you don't want to talk about raising taxes, you criticise the government for raising taxes. Are you willing to increase the national debt in the short term to spend to build infrastructure?
Well, we've set out clear fiscal rules, but we will borrow to invest, but within our rules that we've already set, and we want to see debt coming down as a percentage of our economy. So we've set out the fiscal rules, but very often political leaders, particularly my party, go straight to the spend or tax lever I go first to the growth lever, and that's why I've set out a strong mission, central purpose for an incoming Labour government, if we're privileged enough to get into power, which is that single pursuit of the highest sustained growth in the G7. And by that I mean living standards or higher living standards in every part of the country.
All politicians talk about growth. No politician ever wants to talk about actual money. It's always jam tomorrow. Don't worry, the economy will grow. That's how we'll pay for it. Then the economy doesn't grow, and then you have to find other ways of paying for it, either by increasing taxes or by raising the debt.
Yeah, you're skipping the essential question there, which is why is the economy not growing? And if you talk to investors, as we have been doing in the last 2 or 3 years, who've got a lot of money to invest, they say in clear terms, we're not investing in the UK because of the short-term, non-strategic, chip-chop change approach that this government's had for 13 years. It's politically funny on one level to say we've had 4 chancellors and 4 budgets in the last 12 months. For investment, for growing your economy, it's a disaster. So that's, you have to have a theory, you have to have a plan for growth. You can't just say you want growth, you've got to have a plan for growth. And that's why we've been so careful to set out our plan. And house building is part of that plan.
Would we need fewer houses if we had fewer immigrants? If we have an immigration going up to 1 million a year, that's 1 million people who need housing. Is Labour the party of building more houses but cutting immigration?
Well, firstly, we are the party of building more houses. That's why we've said in clear terms we back the builders, not the blockers. When it comes to immigration, obviously, when it comes to legal migration, then there are many people come here to study, to work, to join their families, and have made a huge contribution over many years.
And do you recognise that they contribute to the economy? So do you want high immigration from those sort of people?
They contribute to our economy. But at the same time, I do think there are fundamental things that are going wrong. We haven't had a proper skills agenda in this country for a very long time. Talk to any business anywhere, basically across the UK, and they will say, I can't get the skills I need, and therefore I do recruit from abroad because I can't get the skills I need here. I don't think that's the right way to do it. Look at our NHS staff. We've got an aspiration to get rid of non-dom status, the special status for the super rich not to pay their tax here, and to use that money to double the number of doctors and nurses coming into the NHS trained in the UK. Now, if we're able to do those things, which I think are the right things to do, then I would expect immigration numbers to come down.
And will you make that as a target? Will you say we want immigration numbers to come down? We want them to be 500,000, 400,000, 300,000. Is that an aim?
Well, look, the last government, this government, had that target approach in place and failed every single year.
So you don't have a target because you think you'll fail?
No, we're not. One thing we will make sure we don't do is repeat the failures of the last 13 years.
Well, that's a failure to deliver on the target. It's not a failure to have a target.
Well, it was a failure from start to finish. What we want is a points-based system, a managed system, a controlled system. And if we take the measures which I think are right for skills, if we take the measures that I think are right for the next generation of the NHS workforce and other issues like that, then I would expect the numbers to come down. But as I say, many people come to this country as students and or to work in this country. They make a valuable contribution, and I'm not going to denigrate that.
You voted Remain, Keir Starmer. You campaigned for, when you were wanting to be leader, saying you would support free movement in the EU. I'd imagine you believe in your heart that being in the European Union is better economically than being out of it. Most of your voters do not believe in Brexit. Do you rule out ever having another referendum while you're Prime Minister?
Yes, I don't see that, and there isn't a case for rejoining the EU. And that's why I've been clear that because we've had a referendum, we've made a decision. If we've learnt one thing, it's that the uncertainty of a referendum and everything that then follows is very, very bad for our economy. And our job, if we're privileged enough to come into government, will be to clear up the mess and rebuild our country. That means we have to make Brexit work. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the deal we've got is good enough. It was said to be, oven ready. It wasn't even half baked. So we've got to get a better deal, and we will get that better deal. You've seen some of the news this morning about Vauxhall and others and their worries about job losses. We've got to turn all that around, but it'll be a question of making Brexit work, not rejoining the EU.
So you don't accept there's something inherent in Brexit that damages the economy? Do you think there is a version of Brexit that you could achieve that will mean the economy is better than staying in the EU?
I think that we need to have a closer trading relationship to fix the problems that we've got. And, if you take, the car manufacturing industry, which is a topic, of course, of discussion today, we've been very good, world leading on car manufacture. I don't give up on that aspiration for our country. I think we can do a number of things. We can make more parts in Britain so that the supply chain is closer. That's a good aspiration that we would put into place. We need a closer trading relationship with the EU. But I will not accept the argument that we are forever on a sort of trajectory of decline in this country. I don't accept decline. I want the trajectory to be for growth, which is why we've got a clear plan for growth.
Right, just finally, Keir Starmer, can we trust you? Are you the man who battled to get Jeremy Corbyn elected, who promised free movement, who wanted to scrap tuition fees, who wanted to increase tax on the highest earners? Are you someone who changes their mind? Are you a man who's willing to abandon your principles to get into the door of number 10? Why should we trust you to be the next Prime Minister?
I think it's very straightforward. And you would challenge me hard if I ignored the damage the Conservatives have done to the economy. We can't just pretend away the last few years. We can't pretend away the mini budget of Liz Truss that took an axe to our economy. And therefore, an incoming Labour government will have to take tough choices. And some of the decisions I've made, let's say tuition fees, where we've had to adjust our position because of the damage that's been done to the economy. And, there are two types of leader. One who says, well, I once said something, and even though we can't now afford it because they've crashed the economy, I'll carry on and make it worse. Or a leader who says, look, they have now crashed the economy. I'm going to have to rethink this and be clear with people. I don't think the tuition fee system, but as it is fair, by the way. We will reform it, but some of the options we might have wanted to make have been taken away from us because of the damage done to the economy. And, most people I talk to would much prefer a leader who's got their feet on the ground, is able to deliver what he or she says according to the circumstances as they now are, not a leader who lives in a world which now doesn't exist in the same way.